The heat shimmered off the asphalt, turning the air at the dusty rural gas station into a visible wave. James Bear Jackson felt the sweat trail down his spine, pasting his worn leather vest to his back. The rumble of his Harley was a familiar comfort, a low thrum that vibrated up through the soles of his boots. He was just passing through, a ghost on a highway, somewhere between a past he didn't talk about and a future he hadn't planned. He swung a leg over the bike, the leather groaning in protest. Inside the convenience store, the air conditioning was a frigid shock. He grabbed a bottle of water, paid the bored teenager at the counter, and headed back out into the furnace of the afternoon. As he unscrewed the cap, a beat-up sedan pulled up to the adjacent pump. An older man, thin and wiry with a tightness around his eyes, got out. He moved with a stiff, almost mechanical precision. From the passenger side, a little girl emerged. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, with pigtails the color of straw and a faded pink t-shirt. Bear took a long swallow of water, his gaze drifting. It was just a man and his granddaughter, a common enough sight. But something was off. The girl's movements were just as stiff as the man's. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes fixed on the cracked pavement. She didn't skip or fidget like kids her age usually did. She moved like a soldier on a minefield. The man inserted the nozzle into his car, his back to the girl. For a split second, her eyes lifted and met Bear's. There was no childish curiosity in them. There was only a cold, desperate plea that hit him like a physical blow. It was a look he hadn't seen since his last tour overseas, the look of the trapped. Then it was gone. Her gaze dropped. The man turned back, his smile a thin, bloodless slash across his face. "Go pick out a candy bar, sweetie. Grandpa will be right in." His voice was smooth, but it didn't match the iciness in his stare. The girl nodded, a jerky, puppet-like motion, and started walking toward the store. As she passed Bear's bike, her steps faltered. A small, folded piece of paper, torn from a notebook, fluttered from her hand and landed near the toe of his boot. It looked like an accident, a piece of trash dropped by a clumsy child. She didn't look back. She just kept walking, her small back rigid, and disappeared inside. Bear stared at the paper. His first instinct was to ignore it. Don't get involved. It was the mantra that had kept him safe, kept him moving for years. Trouble was a magnet, and he was made of steel. But the girl's eyes, they were burned into his mind. He bent down, his knees cracking, and picked up the note. It was warm from her hand. His fingers, thick and calloused from years of gripping handlebars and tools, felt clumsy as he unfolded the small square. The pencil writing was shaky, childlike, but urgent. 5 words. "That man isn't my grandpa." The next word was underlined 3 times. "Help." The air in his lungs turned to ice. The shimmering heat, the distant drone of traffic, the clank of the fuel pump. It all faded into a dull roar. He looked at the sedan. He looked at the door to the convenience store. His heart hammered against his ribs, a heavy, frantic drumbeat. He was a stranger, a big, intimidating man on a motorcycle. Who would believe him? Getting involved could mean cops, questions, and a whole lot of trouble he didn't need. But the image of her face, that silent scream in her eyes, wouldn't let him go. He had seen people in need before and walked away. He still heard their ghosts in the lonely hours of the night. He wasn't going to add a child's ghost to the choir. He folded the note, his knuckles white, and tucked it into his vest pocket. The weight of it felt like a stone. The man finished pumping the gas, his movements still unnervingly precise. He screwed the gas cap on, the clicks echoing in the sudden silence of Bear's world. He glanced over at Bear, his eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second, a flicker of assessment, before his pleasant mask slipped back into place. The man started toward the store. This was it. The window of opportunity was closing. Bear's mind, trained by years of calculating risk in fractions of a second, started to race. He couldn't go in guns blazing, so to speak. He couldn't spook the man. If he had the girl, he was dangerous. He needed a plan. He needed to separate them. He took a deep breath, the hot, gasoline-scented air searing his lungs. He pushed off his bike and began to walk, not toward the store, but toward the man's car. He kept his pace casual, ambling, as if he were just stretching his legs. He pulled out his phone, holding it to his ear, pretending to be deep in a conversation. "Yeah, I'm at the pump now." he said into the dead phone, his voice a low rumble. Just filling up before I head out your way. Should be there in an hour. He walked past the man, giving him a slight nod, the universal sign of roadside camaraderie. The man nodded back, his eyes like chips of flint. Bear reached the front of the sedan and leaned against the fender, keeping his fake phone conversation going. He was now positioned between the man and the driver's side door, a small, strategic barrier. He watched the man go inside. Through the large glass windows, he could see him approach the girl. She was standing by the candy aisle holding a chocolate bar with a trembling hand. The man put a hand on her shoulder. Even from 30 feet away, Bear saw her flinch. It was almost imperceptible, a tiny shudder that ran through her small frame. This is your moment to decide. Do you trust that feeling in your gut when something seems wrong? So many of us are taught to ignore it, to be polite, to not make a scene. But sometimes a scene is exactly what's needed to save a life. If you believe in listening to that inner voice, hit that like button and let us know in the comments if you've ever had a feeling you just couldn't shake. The man guided the girl to the counter. He paid for the gas and the candy, his movements efficient and controlled. He didn't look at the cashier. He didn't smile. His entire focus was on the child at his side. Bear's gut twisted. This wasn't a family outing. This was a man transporting cargo. They came back out into the blistering sun. The man's eyes immediately found Bear, still leaning on his car. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Bear ended his fake call, pocketing his phone. Afternoon, Bear said, his voice calm and even. He didn't move from his spot. Afternoon, the man replied, his tone clipped. He steered the girl toward the passenger door, his hand a vice on her shoulder. Nice car, Bear said, nodding at the sedan. Classic model. Don't see many of these on the road anymore. It was a lie. It was a forgettable 10-year-old vehicle, but it was the only thing he could think of. The man paused, his hand on the passenger door handle. It runs. I'll bet. Bear pushed himself off the fender and took a slow step forward. You know, I think you've got a flat. Rear passenger side. Looks real low. It was a gamble, a classic distraction. The man's eyes narrowed. He was being delayed and he didn't like it. He glanced at the tire, his jaw tight. Looks fine to me. Maybe, Bear said, shrugging. But with the kid in the car, better to be safe, right? Heat like this can do a number on worn tires. He let the word kid hang in the air, a deliberate choice. He wanted to see the man's reaction. The man's gaze snapped back to Bear. The friendly grandpa facade evaporated completely, replaced by something cold and dangerous. We're fine. Get away from my car. The girl, standing frozen by the door, looked at Bear. Her eyes were wide with terror. He had to get her away from him. Now. Bear held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. All right, man. No problem. Just trying to be helpful. He took a step back, creating space. But as he did, he intentionally let his keys slip from his hand. They clattered onto the pavement, skittering directly under the sedan. Ah, hell, he muttered, loud enough for the man to hear. He got down on one knee, pretending to look for them. He was now at eye level with the girl. Her hands were clenched into tiny fists at her sides. Hey, little one, he whispered, his voice soft, not looking directly at her. My name is Bear. When I tell you to, I want you to run to my bike. Don't look back. Just run. Understand? She gave the slightest nod, a movement so small it was almost invisible. The man was growing more agitated. What are you doing? I said get away from my car. Bear found his keys and stood up slowly. He looked the man dead in the eye. You know you were right. The tire is fine. He paused, letting the tension stretch. But you're not. He didn't wait for a response. Now, he yelled, his voice a thunderous roar that cracked the afternoon quiet. The girl didn't hesitate. She bolted. She ran with the desperate speed of a hunted animal, her pigtails flying behind her. She scrambled behind the big Harley, using it as a shield. The man lunged, not for the girl, but for Bear. His speed was shocking. He moved like a viper, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. But Bear was ready. He'd been in 100 scuffles in 100 dusty bars, and a dozen more serious fights in places he'd rather forget. He sidestepped the man's clumsy charge, using his own momentum against him. He didn't throw a punch. He just put his big hand flat on the man's chest and shoved. The man, wiry and light, stumbled backward, hitting the side of his car with a heavy thud. He was momentarily stunned, his breath knocked out of him. It was all the time Bear needed. "Stay behind me," he yelled to the girl. He backed away from the car, keeping himself between her and the man, and pulled out his phone. This time for real. His thumb, slick with sweat, fumbled on the screen. He hit 911. The man scrambled for the driver's side door, his eyes wild. He wasn't going to fight. He was going to flee. He yanked the door open and threw himself inside. The engine roared to life. "He's leaving!" the girl shrieked from behind the bike. "It's okay," Bear said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. He spoke into the phone, his words clipped and precise. "I'm at the Route 7 gas station, about 10 miles east of Harmony Creek. A man has just fled, possible kidnapping. He's in a gray four-door sedan, license plate." He squinted, memorizing the number as the car peeled out of the gas station, spitting gravel. He rattled off the plate number to the dispatcher. He ended the call and turned. The girl was peeking out from behind the engine block, her face pale, her eyes like saucers. He knelt slowly so he wouldn't intimidate her. "Hey," he said gently, "you're safe now. My name's James, but my friends call me Bear." She stared at him, her chest heaving with ragged breaths. Tears began to stream down her dusty cheeks, silent at first, then building into heartbreaking sobs. He didn't move closer. He just stayed there, a large, unmovable mountain, letting her know she was finally safe. He had done the right thing, but the shaking in his own hands told him the danger had been all too real. The wail of sirens grew from a distant cry to a piercing scream in what felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat. Two patrol cars tore into the gas station, lights flashing, scattering the afternoon calm. A sheriff's cruiser, a dark green and white model, pulled in right behind them. The officer who stepped out of the driver's seat was not what Bear had expected. She was a woman in her late 40s with a no-nonsense haircut and eyes that missed nothing. Her name tag read Sheriff Grant. She moved with an air of absolute authority, her gaze sweeping over the scene. The big biker, the trembling child, the empty space where the sedan had been. "You the one who called?" she asked, her voice sharp and direct. Her eyes were on Bear, and they were filled with suspicion. He couldn't blame her. The optics weren't great. A huge, leather-clad man and a terrified little girl. "Yes, ma'am," Bear said, slowly rising to his feet. He kept his hands visible. "The girl, she gave me a note." He reached into his vest pocket and carefully pulled out the folded paper. He held it out to her. A deputy approached the girl, speaking in a low, soothing voice, but she shrank away, her eyes still fixed on Bear. He was her only anchor in the storm. Sheriff Grant took the note, her expression unreadable. She unfolded it and read the 5 small words. Her entire demeanor shifted. The hard suspicion in her eyes softened, replaced by a grim understanding. She looked from the note to the girl, then back to Bear. "Tell me everything," she said. Her voice had lost its edge. Bear recounted the events of the last 15 minutes, his words clear and concise. He described the man's precise movements, the girl's terrified stare, the confrontation, the escape. He gave them the license plate number again. Grant was already relaying it over her radio, ordering a bolo, "Be on the lookout," for the vehicle. "Did he touch you?" Grant asked, her gaze now on the little girl, who was still half hidden behind Bear's leg. The girl shook her head, her pigtails flopping. She pointed a trembling finger at Bear. "He saved me." The words, small and fragile, hung in the air. Grant's eyes met Bear's, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of respect. "What's your name, sweetie?" the sheriff asked gently. "Lily," she whispered. "Okay, Lily. You were very brave," Grant said. "This man here," she nodded at Bear, "did a very good thing. We're going to find your real family now, all right?" Lily nodded, but she didn't move. She stayed pressed against Bear's leg as if he were a giant redwood and she was a sapling in a hurricane. Paramedics arrived, and a female EMT approached Lily cautiously. Bear gave the girl's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "These people are here to help," he murmured. "They're the good guys, you can trust them." He felt her relax just a little. She finally allowed the EMT to check her over. As they did, Sheriff Grant pulled Bear aside. "We got a hit on the plate," she said, her voice low. "Car was reported stolen 2 days ago from a town 100 miles north. Fits the timeline of a missing child report from the same area. Lily Peterson, abducted from her front yard." Bear's blood ran cold. He had been right. His gut had been right. The man. No ID yet, but he's not her grandfather. The girl's parents are on their way here now. They're hysterical with relief. She looked him up and down again, but this time with a different kind of assessment. You have good instincts, Mr. Jackson. Just call me Bear. Bear, then, she said, a small, wry smile touching her lips. Most people would have thrown that note away. Most people wouldn't have gotten involved. I almost didn't, he admitted, the thought sending a shiver through him despite the heat. But you did, she said simply. That's what matters. An hour later, another car screeched into the gas station lot. A man and a woman tumbled out, their faces etched with a year's worth of fear and sleepless nights. Lily! The woman cried, her voice breaking. At the sound of her mother's voice, Lily, who had been sitting quietly in the back of an ambulance, flew out of the vehicle. She ran into her parents' arms, and the three of them collapsed into a sobbing, relieved heap on the asphalt. Bear watched from a distance, a lump forming in his throat. He felt out of place, a relic from the violent moment that had preceded this beautiful one. He turned to leave to get back on his bike and disappear down the highway, as he always did. Wait, it was Sheriff Grant. They're going to want to thank you. That's not necessary, he said, his voice gruff. I just did what anyone would have done. No, she said, her gaze steady. You did what you did, and it made all the difference. Stick around. We'll need a formal statement anyway. She paused. And besides, I think that little girl wants to see you one more time. He looked over at the family. Lily had pulled away from her parents and was looking right at him. Her face was tear-streaked and blotchy. But for the first time, he saw a real smile. A real, childish, brilliant smile. He stayed. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. By the time everything was settled, the man whose name was found to be Frank Miller, a drifter with a long sheet of priors, was apprehended 30 miles down the highway. He'd surrendered without a fight, the cold precision gone, replaced by the dull apathy of a caged animal. Lily and her parents, after giving their statements, walked over to where Bear was standing by his bike. Lily's father, a man whose hands were shaking with residual shock and overwhelming gratitude, grabbed Bear's hand and shook it with both of his. I don't know what to say, he stammered, his eyes welling up. How do you thank someone for everything? No thanks needed, Bear said, feeling awkward under the weight of their emotion. Just glad she's safe. Lily's mother hugged him, burying her face in his leather vest. You're our angel, she sobbed. Our big guardian angel on a motorcycle. Bear gently patted her back, completely out of his element. Then he felt a small tug on his jeans. He looked down. Lily was standing there, holding up the chocolate bar she'd gotten from the store, now slightly melted. This is for you, she said in a small, clear voice. He knelt down, his heart feeling like it was going to burst. He took the candy bar from her. Thank you, Lily. This is the best chocolate bar I've ever gotten. She threw her little arms around his thick neck and hugged him tightly. Thank you for reading my note, Bear, she whispered in his ear. He hugged her back, a wave of emotion washing over him, cleansing the dust and loneliness from the corners of his soul. In that moment, he wasn't a drifter anymore. He was a hero, her hero. The epilogue to that scorching afternoon at a gas station wasn't written in police reports or newspaper articles, though there were a few of those. It was written in the years that followed. Bear gave his statement to Sheriff Grant, and when he was done, she handed him her card. If you're ever passing through Harmony Creek again and need anything, a meal, a garage, a friendly face, you call me, she said. It wasn't a professional courtesy. It was an invitation, an offer of friendship. He did pass through again, not by accident, but on purpose. The first time was a month later. He met Grant for coffee at the local diner. They talked for hours. He learned her name was Sarah, that she had 2 grown kids, and that she'd been sheriff for a decade. She learned a little about him, not the things he ran from, but the man he was trying to be. He also visited Lily and her family. They lived in a small, welcoming house with a big front yard. The awkwardness of their first meeting was replaced by a deep, unspoken bond. They insisted he stay for dinner. Lily, no longer a silent, terrified child, chattered away, showing him her drawings and her toys. She had drawn a picture of him. It was a giant, smiling man in a black vest, standing next to a purple motorcycle. a massive, friendly bear. He folded it carefully and put it in his wallet, where it stayed for the rest of his life. That visit became a tradition. 4 times a year, every season, Bear would ride his Harley to their town. He became Uncle Bear. He was there for birthdays and holidays. He taught Lily how to change the oil in a car when she was 16. He was there, beaming in the front row, when she graduated high school. The bond he formed wasn't just with Lily's family. He and Sheriff Sarah Grant became the unlikeliest of best friends. He'd often stop in Harmony Creek just to see her. They'd sit on her porch, drinking iced tea, and talk about life. She helped him find work as a mechanic at a local garage, a place where his skills were valued and his past didn't matter. The road, which had once been his escape, slowly became just a way to get from one place he loved to another. He stopped running. He found a home, not in a place, but in the people he'd allowed into his life. Frank Miller was sentenced to life in prison. During the trial, it came out that he had done this before. He was a predator who targeted children in quiet, sleepy towns, relying on the fact that people didn't want to get involved. Lily was the first one who got away. Her courage, that tiny folded note, broke a cycle of horror and put a monster behind bars for good. Her 5 words saved not only herself, but countless other children he would have harmed. Years later, when Lily was in college studying to be a child psychologist, she gave a speech at a community event. Bear and her parents were in the audience. "Courage isn't always a loud roar," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Sometimes it's a quiet whisper, a shaky hand passing a note, a gut feeling you refuse to ignore. It's the choice to see something wrong and not look away." She looked out into the crowd and her eyes found Bear's. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear worn-out leather and ride a Harley. The story of that day became a quiet legend in their lives. It was a reminder of how a single moment, a single choice, can branch off into 1,000 better futures. For Lily, it was the day she got her life back. For her parents, it was the day they witnessed a miracle. And for Bear, it was the day he stopped being a ghost on the highway and remembered how to be a man. He found a family, a purpose, and a peace he never thought he deserved. All because of a little girl, a folded piece of paper, and the choice to listen to a voice that said, "Help." We all have that voice inside of us, that instinct that tells us when something is wrong. The real test is whether we have the courage to listen. Thank you for watching, and if this story reminded you of the hero hiding inside all of us, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the extraordinary power of ordinary people.